Okay, so imagine this. You're handed a whole mountain of regulatory documents about utility company.
Daunting, right.
Yeah, totally
Huge
daunting.
stack of papers.
But that's what we do here. We dive into these things so you don't have to. And today we are looking at the world of Abu Dhabi's water and electricity regulations.
That's right.
And we're looking specifically at this decision paper from June 2023.
Yep.
It outlines how the Department of Energy Bordeaux is setting price controls and incentives for companies like the ones that actually send you your utility bill every month. So
Right.
this deep dive, think of it as like a shortcut
Yeah.
to understanding how government decisions in this area actually impact what you pay for water and electricity.
It's a bit like peeking behind the curtain,
No, yeah.
We get to see the mechanisms that determine not just what you pay, but also how these companies are encouraged or even nudged,
Right.
towards efficiency and sustainability.
Exactly. So to do that, we've got two main documents we're looking at.
Okay.
RC2 Final Decision Paper 12 June 2023 .pdf.
All right.
That's the main course.
The main course.
And then we've got a supporting summary called Second Regulatory Control .pdf
Right.
to help us kind of digest everything.
Makes sense.
Now, the current control period for these companies, what they call RC1,
Mm-hmm.
runs out at the end of this year.
Right.
So this document's really setting the stage for the next phase, what they're calling RC2, which kicks off January 1st, 2023.
And one of the first things you notice is that they're sticking with this CPIX revenue cap model.
Okay, CPIX.
Yeah.
Break that down for us. Like, what does that actually mean for someone, paying their electricity bill at home?
So essentially it means companies can adjust their prices based on inflation.
Okay.
That's the CPI part.
Right.
But the X factor is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
So the DOE sets a target for companies to beat inflation by becoming more efficient.
Uh-huh.
So if they can keep their costs down, they can actually earn more revenue.
So it's a built-in incentive to not just pass on, like,
Exactly.
rising costs directly to the consumer.
It encourages them to find ways to be more efficient, be more innovative.
Right.
And if they don't hit that X target, well, their earnings might be capped, which could impact, their ability to invest in new infrastructure or technology.
Okay, so that's the big picture. But let's zoom in on the nitty-gritty
Right.
of how these revenues are actually calculated.
Okay.
The document mentions operating expenses, depreciation, return on capital.
Yeah,
It's a lot to unpack.
it is.
Where do we even begin?
Well, let's start with the operating expenses, or OPEX.
Okay.
This is where they really had to get granular, looking at everything from salaries to maintenance costs.
Right.
And they use a combination of approaches, a top-down analysis to see the overall trends,
Okay.
and then a bottom-up assessment to dig into the specifics of each company.
And to make sure the companies weren't, inflating their costs,
Yeah.
they brought in external consultants, right?
You got it.
To double check.
These consultants benchmarked the costs against industry standards.
Right.
To ensure everything was in line.
No one was sneaking in those extra lattes.
Exactly.
Right, so I like that they're keeping a close eye on things.
Yeah.
Now, there was one point that seemed to cause a little bit of friction between the DOE and the companies,
Okay.
and that's the weighted average cost of capital,
Right.
or WACC.
The WACC.
It sounds pretty technical,
Yeah.
but why should someone at home,
Yeah.
care about this WACC?
Well, think of the WACC like the rate of return that these companies are allowed to earn on their investments.
Okay,
So the higher the WACC, the more revenue they're allowed to generate.
okay,
And initially, the DOE proposed 3.40%,
uh-huh.
which the companies argued was too low,
Too low given the current economic climate.
given all the different factors going on in the world.
So they pushed back a bit
They did.
on that number.
And what's interesting is that the DOE listened.
Yeah.
They bumped it up to 4.90%,
Wow.
acknowledging the unprecedented global uncertainty we're all facing.
That's a significant jump.
It is,
So what does this higher WACC actually mean for someone at home?
well, it could lead to higher bills, potentially.
Potentially.
But it also means these companies have a better chance of attracting investors
Right.
and funding those big infrastructure projects
Yeah.
that are needed to keep the lights on and the water flowing.
It's a balancing act for sure.
Absolutely, and it shows that the DOE isn't operating in a vacuum.
Right.
They're taking into account real-world economic factors and trying to find a solution that works for both the companies and the people that they serve.
Okay, so we've covered how much money these companies can make.
Yeah,
But how about how they spend it?
okay.
What's the DOE's stance on investment, especially when it comes to innovation and sustainability?
Well, one of the most interesting aspects of this RC2 document is the emphasis on what they call ex-ante reviews.
Ex ante.
Yeah.
That sounds like a fancy way of saying before
Precisely.
you do it.
It means that instead of just checking up on projects after they're built,
Right.
the DOE is now taking a much closer look at proposed investments before they get the green light.
Oh, okay.
So really shifting from reacting to proactively planning,
Yeah.
it ensures careful consideration of each project's long-term impact, particularly its alignment with sustainability goals.
So they're basically
They're
saying,
saying,
show us how this is going to benefit the community and the environment.
yeah, in the long run.
Yeah.
And there's one area where this is particularly apparent, digitalization.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so there's a whole section dedicated to the company's digitalization strategy.
Okay.
And the DOE wants to see detailed plans for how they'll leverage technology to improve services.
Yeah.
We're talking about smart grids, advanced metering systems, data analytics,
Okay.
all the cool stuff that can make the utility sector more efficient and responsive.
So it's not just about laying more pipes and power lines.
No.
It's about using technology to make
To make the existing
infrastructure work.
work smarter.
Yeah.
Smarter. And for you, that means the potential for more personalized services, better control over your consumption,
Right.
and hopefully a more sustainable energy future.
I love it.
Yeah.
It seems like the DOE is really pushing for a modern and innovative approach to utility services.
They are.
But let's be realistic, not every company is going to jump for joy
Right.
at all these new regulations.
That's true.
How does the DOE actually plan to hold them accountable?
Right.
Make sure they actually walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Well, they've got a whole system of carrots and sticks, or to use the official term, a performance incentive scheme,
Okay.
or PIS.
Break all this PIS for us. What's
Okay.
being rewarded? What's being penalized?
So it covers a wide range of areas, from customer service and network performance to sustainability initiatives
Okay.
and data reporting.
Uh-huh.
So companies that exceed expectations get rewarded, while those that fall short face financial consequences.
Oh, okay.
They're basically saying, if you want to play in this sandbox, you've got to play by the rules and deliver results.
So it's about making sure these companies are truly serving the community effectively.
Exactly.
Now, I'm curious about the specifics of this PIS.
Okay.
Any particularly interesting nuggets in there?
Oh, there's one that really caught my eye.
Okay.
They've incorporated something called the value of lost load, or VOL, into their calculations.
Value of lost load.
Vol.
Vol. What is that?
It essentially puts a price tag on blackouts.
Wait, so they're literally putting a dollar value
Yeah, far.
on the inconvenience of losing power.
Precisely, they're saying that reliability is paramount.
Okay.
And every time the lights go out,
Yeah.
there's a real cost associated with it, not just for individuals, but for the entire economy.
So this vol incentivizes companies to minimize those frustrating outages.
It does.
And invest in making the grid more reliable.
Exactly.
It's like saying, hey, you're not just inconveniencing people when you have a blackout, you're actually causing tangible financial damage.
You are.
It sounds like the DOE is really trying to strike a balance here.
It is.
Promoting efficiency and innovation while ensuring affordability and reliability for the people of Abu Dhabi.
It's definitely a complex juggling act.
Yeah.
But this document gives us a glimpse into how they're attempting to navigate these challenges and shape the future of the utility sector.
And it's a future that we're all a part of, so we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
Yeah, we have.
But before we move on, I want to leave you with one question to ponder.
Okay, I'm all ears.
The document hints at a potential shift toward a toe-tax regime in the future,
Okay,
which would change how these companies manage their investments.
right,
We'll dig into that more later, but for now, think about this.
right.
Do you think giving companies more flexibility could lead to more innovation? Or would it risk sacrificing the careful cost controls that are in place now?
That's a great question.
It's a question worth considering as we continue our exploration of this fascinating world.
It is a really interesting question. Yeah, it's a question with a lot of nuances, right? And it's not just about financial models. This document also reveals a lot about the DOE's broader vision, for the sector.
It's like you said, those hidden messages and a piece of art. We've decoded the financial framework.
Yeah,
But now we're seeing the bigger picture, like the vision for a future that's not just about keeping the lights on, but doing it smarter and more sustainably.
exactly. And for example, that focus on digitalization that we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
it's not just about embracing the latest gadgets. It's about using those tools to improve efficiency, create better customer service experiences, and ultimately contribute to Abu Dhabi's sustainability goals.
Speaking of sustainability, there's a significant portion of the document that's dedicated to water.
Right.
Which makes sense, given the desert environment.
Absolutely, water conservation is paramount in Abu Dhabi, and the regulations reflect that
Yeah.
the DOE isn't just setting price controls. They're pushing these companies to actively promote water-saving measures.
Okay.
And invest in technologies that reduce waste, They're even incentivizing the use of recycled water.
Recycled water. So not just for drinking, I'm assuming.
Right. Think irrigation industrial processes, anything where potable water isn't strictly necessary.
Okay.
It's about creating a more circular economy for water.
Yeah.
And the DOE is using those financial incentives to make it happen.
So are companies that exceed their recycled water usage targets
They are
rewarded?
rewarded, absolutely. Okay.
So they're not just saying conserve water, they're actually creating a system that encourages it.
Yeah, they're putting their money where their mouth is.
And on the flip side, are there penalties for companies that don't meet these targets?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
The stick is just as important as the carrot.
Right.
If they fail to meet those performance targets, whether it's customer service network reliability or data reporting, there are financial consequences.
Okay, it seems like this whole framework is designed to keep these companies on their toes.
Yeah.
Ensure they're aligned with the DOE's vision.
Right.
Now, let's circle back to that TOTEX concept we touched on earlier.
Okay.
It seems like a pretty significant shift from the current model. So can you just walk us through some of the potential benefits and drawbacks?
Sure. So one of the main arguments in favor of TOTEX is that it gives companies more flexibility.
Okay.
Instead of having separate budgets for operating expenses and capital investments, they could potentially shift funds between the two depending on their needs and priorities.
So if they find a really innovative way to reduce their operating costs,
Yep.
they could reinvest those savings into a cutting-edge sustainability project
Exactly.
without having to, like, jump through a bunch of hoops.
It could unlock a lot of potential for innovation.
Okay.
But, and this is the big but,
Yeah.
there are concerns that this increased flexibility could weaken cost control mechanisms.
So while it might encourage innovation,
Yeah.
it could also lead to higher prices for consumers.
Potentially, yeah, if companies aren't careful.
Right.
It's a trade-off that regulators all over the world are grappling with.
Right.
How do you encourage innovation without sacrificing affordability?
It's a tough question.
It is.
It sounds like finding the right balance is going to be really crucial if they decide to move towards a TOTEX regime.
Absolutely, but even without TOTEX, what we're seeing here is a regulatory approach that's not static. You know,
Right.
it's constantly adapting to new technologies, shifting economic realities, and evolving societal priorities.
And for those of us who aren't, policy wonks, it's easy to feel disconnected from these developments.
Yeah.
But they actually have a ripple effect on our lives, don't they?
They do think about it this way. The decisions made in this document influence how much you pay for your utilities,
Yeah.
the quality of service you receive, and even the types of energy solutions that will be available to you in the future.
So it's not just abstract policy jargon.
No.
It's about the energy that powers our homes, our businesses, our lives.
Exactly.
And these performance incentives that we talk about, they have a real impact on the quality of service we get.
Absolutely. They affect the responsiveness of customer support, the frequency of power outages, and even how quickly companies adopt those innovative solutions we talked about.
Right.
It all comes back to that interconnectedness,
Yeah.
between regulation, innovation, and your daily life.
It's a powerful reminder that staying informed about these things isn't just for academics or industry insiders.
Right.
It's relevant to all of us.
It is.
Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I wanted to revisit a detail that we touched on earlier.
Okay.
And that's the value of lost load, or VOL.
Ah, yes, putting a price tag on the inconvenience of blackouts.
It sounds almost like a theoretical economic concept,
Yeah.
but it actually has very practical implications.
It absolutely does, because by incorporating vol into their calculations, the DOE is acknowledging that the cost of a blackout goes beyond just the lost electricity.
Right. It's about the disruption to businesses, the impact on productivity, the inconvenience to people's daily lives.
Exactly.
All those things have a real cost.
And that cost is being factored into the equation.
Right.
So when companies experience outages, they're not just dealing with the technical challenge of restoring power,
Yeah.
they're also facing a financial penalty
Right.
that reflects that broader impact on the community.
It's a pretty powerful way to incentivize them to prioritize reliability.
It is.
It's not just about fixing problems quickly.
No.
It's about preventing them in the first place.
Exactly. By attaching a financial value to reliability, they're encouraging companies to invest in infrastructure upgrades, preventative maintenance, and smart grid technologies that can reduce the likelihood of those disruptions.
So in a way, incorporating VOL into the framework is like a proactive approach
It is.
to ensuring a stable and resilient energy system for everyone in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
And hopefully it means fewer of those frustrating moments when the lights go out unexpectedly.
That's the goal, and it's another example of how economic principles can be applied to drive positive change in the real world.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that these policy decisions, while they might seem complex, are ultimately about improving people's lives.
It's about ensuring that the systems that underpin our modern world are reliable, efficient, and sustainable.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to that bigger question that's woven throughout this whole document.
That question of how to balance innovation and affordability, how to create a system that works for both the companies and the consumers they serve.
And ultimately, how to ensure that the decisions made today create a better energy future for everyone in Abu Dhabi.
That's right.
But as we've seen, it's not just about Abu Dhabi.
No.
These challenges are global, and the solutions being explored here could have implications far beyond the borders of this emirate.
Yeah, it really highlights how interconnected we all are,
We are,
especially when it comes to energy.
especially energy,
Like
yeah.
what's happening in Abu Dhabi with these regulations could actually offer valuable insights for other countries
These could.
that are facing similar challenges.
Absolutely. This is a global conversation, and we're seeing a real shift in thinking about how utility services are delivered and regulated.
And it's not just about keeping up with new technology.
It's about meeting the evolving expectations of consumers, right?
Exactly. People want more than just reliable and affordable service.
Right.
They're looking for greater control over their energy usage, access to those innovative solutions, and a sense of ownership in the system.
It's like that shift from being like passive recipients of a service to becoming active participants
Right.
in the energy ecosystem.
Exactly, yeah.
And this is where that idea of a toe tax regime could potentially be a game changer.
Right, because by giving companies more flexibility to manage their investments, it could unlock the potential for all sorts of exciting new technologies.
Okay.
Things like smart meters that provide real-time feedback on your energy consumption, or distributed generation systems that allow you to produce your own renewable energy.
Imagine a future where you could not only monitor your usage, but also potentially sell excess energy back to the grid
Yeah?
from your rooftop solar panels.
That's the kind of transformative potential that Totex could unlock.
Yeah.
It's about empowering individuals to become more than just consumers, but also producers and active managers of their own energy.
It sounds incredible, but I know you mentioned some concerns about potential drawbacks.
Of course, it's not a magic bullet. The big question with Totex is how to ensure that this increased flexibility doesn't come at the cost of affordability.
Right.
If companies have more freedom to shift funds around, how do we make sure they don't pass on unnecessary costs to consumers?
So it's like walking a tightrope
It is.
between encouraging innovation
Yeah,
and protecting the interests of the people who ultimately pay the bills.
exactly. And that's where the role of the regulator becomes even more crucial.
Right.
They need to have strong oversight mechanisms in place, not just to monitor how companies are spending money, but also to make sure that any price increases are justified
Yeah.
and that consumers are protected from undue burden.
So it's not just about changing the rules of the game.
No,
It's about making sure the referees are equipped
right.
to keep everything fair and balanced.
Precisely, it's about creating a regulatory framework that strikes the right balance between fostering innovation and ensuring accountability.
Well, after this deep dive into this decision paper,
Yeah,
I'm convinced that this TOTEX concept has the potential to be a real game changer.
it does.
But it needs to be implemented thoughtfully with careful consideration of both the benefits and the risks.
I agree. It's definitely a topic worth following closely as this debate continues to unfold.
And it's a reminder that these decisions about energy regulations aren't just happening in some far-off boardroom.
They're not, no.
They have a direct impact on our lives,
They do.
on how much we pay for utilities, what kind of energy choices we have, and even on the future of our planet.
So the next time you flip on a light switch, remember that there's a whole world of regulations, incentives, and innovations working behind the scenes to make that moment possible.
And as technology keeps advancing, as our understanding of sustainability deepens, and as our expectations as consumers continue to evolve, the landscape of energy will keep changing.
It will so stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged because the future of energy is something we all have a stake in shaping.
And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the fascinating world of Abu Dhabi's utility regulations.
We hope you found it insightful.
And maybe even spark some thoughts about the future of energy.
Yeah.
Both here in Abu Dhabi and around the world.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.